I am extremely pleased to join this meeting for the first time, taking over the role from the European Commission lead co-chair, and that was my predecessor, Patrick Child. Patrick Child was the Deputy Director General of the DG, the Director General in the European Commission for Research and Innovation. I am now occupying that role in the DG RTD, as we call it internally in the European Commission. And that is since the 1st of October of this year. Well, before coming to research and innovation, I have been experienced in the European Commission, mostly on, firstly, small and medium-sized enterprises as part of the DG responsible for enterprise and industry. And then the last 5.5 years, I have been also very much involved as Deputy Director General of the DG responsible for the environment in the European Commission. And there, as you can imagine, it has been quite an important, if you like, seamless transition to research and innovation. Why? Because whereas before coming to research and innovation, I was doing environmental policy and the substance of it, the science of it. Now we are funding that research, funding the innovation that we need in order to change our behaviors, our individual behaviors, to go forward and do what is necessary in order to live up to the expectations of our planet in order for the green transition to happen. So part of my duties, actually, as present in the European Commission, is to allow even more space for science to advise policy. And as you can imagine, this is also very important because of GEO, the Global Earth Observation Initiative, which is actually the mainstream activity of this group. So I'm very, very happy, indeed happy to have this role to facilitate the decision-making of the plenary session in order that GEO is ready to face the challenges within the last 3 years of its 2015 to 2025 implementation plan. The 10-year plan, we have come to the last 3 years, and of course, we are very excited in order to ensure that we have exceeded expectations, but we also excite by building up the expectations for the next implementation plan. And therefore, that work starts already from today. However, we have a very tight agenda today of the opening session, and therefore allow me to hand over the floor consecutively to my fellow co-chairs for a short introduction, starting first, if I may, with China. Mr. Guang Jun Zhang, thank you.
各位联合主席、GEO 首席代表、秘书处主任、各位同事、朋友们，大家好！很高兴与大家相聚在今年的会议周，在此热烈欢迎新加入的欧盟联合主席乔安娜·德雷克女士，诚挚感谢新任秘书处主任雅娜·格沃根女士带领的秘书处为本次会议周所做的精心筹备，衷心祝贺各成员国和参加组织在推动地球观测发展方面取得的丰硕成果。今年10月，联合国生物多样性大会首次提出地球生命共同体这一理念，倡议国际社会携手建设清洁美丽的世界。本次会议周聚焦陆地植被、欧亚草原、典型湖泊等主题，面向全球共享4个报告和30多个数据集，为保护生态环境和实现可持续发展提供信息支撑。我相信本次会议周必将成为地球观测政策界、科学界、工程界、产业界以及青年人思维碰撞、交流合作的重要平台。2021年，中国 GEO 正式设立了数据灾害应急响应机制，联合新西兰、日本、国际数据委员会等伙伴， 面向发展中国家突发灾难的需求，开展数据和制图服务。今年已为印度尼西亚、泰国的地震和洪涝灾害提供了数据服务。我们希望更多成员国和国际组织加入这项工作。最近，联合国气候变化框架公约第26次缔约方大会成功举办，中方也发布了2030年前碳达峰行动方案，愿与国际社会一道推动巴黎协定全面、平衡、有效实施。这一年，区域 GEO 同样取得了诸多实质性进展，由中方举办的 AO-GEO 国际研讨会和由日本主办的国际学术研讨会均如期召开，共商 AO-GEO 未来发展方向，并设立了首个区域能力发展中心，促进发展中国家地球观测能力建设。在地球观测技术不断进步与数字技术融合发展的时代， GEO 已经率先迈出了坚实的一步，推动了地球观测知识开放和服务，并逐步为全球重要议题提供解决方案。让我们继续携手并肩，持续推动地球观测的发展和应用，共创一个平等、多样和包容的 GEO。谢谢大家。
Thank you so much there to the Vice Minister Guan Zhang, and with the renewed apologies about the technical hitch earlier, but it worked this time. In the meantime, may I please introduce the other co-chair, South Africa, Mr. Mboneni Mofe.
Let's look.
Floor is yours.
You're gonna do it.
I'd like to pass my sincere greetings to all the GEO community members as we gather here today for yet another plenary under virtual circumstances. I want to really acknowledge the good work that has gone on into making sure that this event is again a success. And in this regard, let me acknowledge the work of the GEO Secretariat under the leadership of Yana, and also the good work in ensuring the implementation of various programs of GEO that is being overseen by the program board. I also want to say to my fellow co-chairs that the work of steering GEO under these current circumstances has not been easy, but I think it has been through sheer dedication and commitment that, with the support that we have received from the executive committee, we sit here today being happy that at least most, if not all, of what we needed to do have been accomplished during this year. I want to highlight also the important participation and contribution that has been made by various of our members in the work of COP26 that has just finished a couple of days ago. That in that regard, I think we have done our best to raise the flag of GEO high. I want to also acknowledge today, as we make some reflection on the work that has been done through the midterm evaluation of GEO, that there are indeed a number of recommendations that have been made which we take seriously if we are to achieve the overall objectives and the mandate of GEO. And in this regard, let me acknowledge one of the recommendations, which is the continued strengthening of the regional GEOs. The regional GEOs have achieved so much since their establishment, and I think without any exception, they have actually grown from strength to strength. I want to acknowledge the work, for example, that has been done in our regards through the AfriGEO, that today we are beginning to see the increase in number, not only of those who signed to be members of GEO, but those who are choosing to actually participate in the work of GEO. I want to say in that regard, also acknowledge the support that we continue to receive from other regional GEOs, that indeed we are beginning to work as a coordinated GEO community, regardless of where we are situated globally. I want to really acknowledge and thank the appointment of the South African National Space Agency as the project management office for Digital Earth Africa. As the government of South Africa, we look forward to this challenge, and we're going to be giving our space agency all the necessary support it requires in order to make this vision of a successful DIA a reality. We are quite impressed that even as we deal with this, our space agency has been involved and continues to be involved in many other interventions, including those that are positioning us as a country in a good stead in terms of our response to the outbreak of COVID-19. And I think it really sets the tone of how Earth observation is going to be used in the management and response to other future pandemics. In this regard, let me also acknowledge the work that we are doing with regards to the South African Mercury network, where we have established a network to really contribute to one of the flagship programs of GEO. And in this regard, I'm pleased that as South African government, we have allocated financial resources and we are establishing the necessary human and infrastructure capacity support program that will ensure that this work actually grows in a manner that we can be able to also expand to the rest of the region. I want to say, as we work today and tomorrow, let us continue to bear in mind that much has been done, but there is even much that will need to be done. And in order to achieve that, we will need to work together as a community like we have done. I think we have reached the heights that we have today because of GEO's special approach in ensuring that while we want to walk this long journey, we actually walk together and not alone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mboneni, for your message. May I now pass the floor to the US, Stephen Volz.
Hello, I'm Steve Volz, and I serve as the U.S. Principal to GEO and the co-chair of GEO's Executive Committee, representing the Americas. I'm also the Acting Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Environmental Observation and Prediction, and in that role responsible for all of NOAA's observing systems, including ocean, ground, and atmospheric systems. And I'm the Assistant Administrator for Satellite and Information Services at NOAA, where I oversee NOAA's Environmental Satellite Data and Information Service. It's a real pleasure and a privilege to be with you for the 17th GEO Plenary and for the associated GEO Week 2021 events. Although we are convening this plenary in a virtual format for the first time, we are joined as one GEO community. We are dedicated as a global community to use our global Earth observing system of systems to integrate observing systems, to share our data and our observations, and to integrate those observations through shared standards to create a powerful and essential information resource to the people and the communities of the world. Without good data to support decisions, progress towards the objectives and societal well-being envisioned under the UN Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, under the Paris Agreement, and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction would not be tractable or even possible. Milestones and objectives identified this month at the Conference of the Parties, COP26, will also rely on our observations for validation and for assessment. But we must move beyond just sharing data and collecting data. We must work with our community of users to ensure that data, information, and more importantly, the knowledge derived from the data and information are widely shared and used to inform policy and decision makers. Our goal is to provide our policy and decision makers with the information they need to make the right decisions as we mitigate a changing climate, as we work to meet the sustainable development goals, reduce our risk from disasters and devastating disasters, and determine how to make and keep our cities and our settlements resilient and healthy. This week will be challenging as we have registrants participating from 6 continents, spanning well over 20 time zones, potentially 24, but I know every time zone may not be represented. But this challenge also represents the commitment of the GEO community as we work to accelerate action in GEO. GEO right now is at a critical juncture. We are just completing our midterm evaluation, and I hope that you have had the opportunity to review the comprehensive report from the midterm evaluation team with its 15 key findings and 10 recommendations. You will see that the findings and the recommendations from the midterm evaluation report are interwoven throughout the plenary and the anchor session agendae, and it is the intention of GEO leadership to take these observations to heart as we develop our last GEO Work Programme under the 2016 to 2025 GEO Strategic Plan. And as we look forward to the next phase of GEO preparing to seek the renewal of our mandate beyond 2025. Over the course of this week, I invite the GEO principals to consider how to best ensure that GEO's global policy is still relevant, to identify cohesion, synergies, and ways to integrate across the GEO Work Programme activities, to strengthen the science and the policy interface, and to improve the availability, access, and use of Earth observations for a sustainable planet. I look forward to the presentations and the discussions this week, and I thank all of you for your commitment to GEO.
Thank you very much, Steve, for your remarks. May I now invite GEO Secretary Director Amir Giovanti with her opening remarks and also a presentation. Yana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Well, this wouldn't be a virtual event if we didn't have technical difficulties. And this wouldn't be a GEO community if everyone didn't immediately spring into action, trying to troubleshoot these technical difficulties. That's really the hallmark of this community. So thank you very much. And hopefully now that we get this out of the way, the rest is going to be smooth sailing. Hello everyone, and a really warm welcome to the GEO Week and this plenary. A year ago, you warmly welcomed me as the incoming Secretariat Director. At that time, I shared with you some of the areas where I was going to prioritize efforts. These were increasing our engagement with GEO members, better leveraging the vast network of the participating organizations and associates, strengthening our communications efforts, and beginning forward thinking about the post-2025 GEO that will maximize the potential of the GEO Work Programme activities. Fast forward 1 year, this GEO Week and this 17th plenary will lay down key stepping stones on that path. In the run-up to the GEO Week, the Secretariat often gets questions from member delegations, such as, what are the objectives of the sessions? What's the message here? What's the action to the principles? So I'd like to briefly address this here. The GEO plenary is the assembly of GEO principles, the main representatives of members, participating organizations, and associates that mandated GEO to do our work. As representatives of these countries, governments, key partner organizations, you obviously have reasonable expectations that GEO is making sufficient progress to meet strategic goals and objectives, that GEO performs to its potential and meets the expectations of the members. The plenary is where we demonstrate to you this progress, present to you defined needs, and look to you to take action after the plenary to follow up on the needs and opportunities that we discuss here so that collectively we sustain and accelerate progress. So this week, we will showcase to you a select number of GEO Work Programme activities and efforts by the GEO community that, thanks to your support over the years, have matured to the point where they are providing policy relevant insights and operational level decision support to countries around the world. To accelerate their progress, these activities count on you for continued support and engagement, from sustaining funding for these activities to facilitating critical connections with relevant end user communities at regional, national, and local level so that their value can be realized through the uptake by these users of the results. We also count on your active facilitation of stakeholder connections at country level so that we can advance GEO's contributions to global policy in the GEO engagement areas. On this note, on behalf of the GEO Climate Change Working Group and the Secretariat, I thank all of the GEO principals who responded to our October campaign to seek mandate for GEO from UNFCCC to provide regular input to the UNFCCC negotiations. At COP26, while we didn't quite come out with the desired end result, we began the process. We began the process by securing recognition for GEO through a mention by one member country delegation, through the mention of GEO in the technical negotiations conclusion. For the first time after 14 years, GEO was recognized in a document coming out of Conference of the Parties. This also taught us a very important lesson that next year we will have to engage with you very early in the year so that we can reach your UNFCCC focal points and prepare your national delegations with enough knowledge and information about GEO so they feel comfortable, including an endorsement for GEO in their national statement to the subsidiary body plenaries. So this is an important strategic priority for GEO, but also one example of how the role of the principal matters if we are to achieve the objectives that we set for ourselves. There is exciting work ahead. The midterm evaluation that was mentioned already has been very helpful in reaffirming our successful practices and identifying areas that need improvement and revectoring of our efforts. These recommendations and the response that the executive committee developed on your behalf is an opportunity to sharpen our focus and lay the groundwork for post-2025 GEO. One such opportunity is for GEO to harness Earth observations to support integrated decision-making. And the path to this is through the integration of GEO Work Programme activities, integration across data, services, platforms, integration of thematic areas and communities, and integration of policymaking and decision-making. If this sounds a lot like a systems change, it's because it's pretty close to a systems change. And to succeed in this, the GEO community will once again rely on your GEO principles, active support to achieve considerable and comprehensive increase in engagement with members, participating organizations, associates, and all stakeholders around the world. So thank you for being here. Again, I hope for no further disruptions. And back to Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jana, for your very exciting and encouraging words. It's my turn now as lead co-chair and coming towards the end of my mandate, at the end of our mandate as European Commission, to just make a few reflections. But first of all, I'd like to thank for the collaboration that we have had with GEO Secretariat, first with Gilberto Camara, and now with also Jana and with all of you. But I'd like to take this opportunity as GEO lead co-chair for 2021 to share three main messages. First of all, I'd like to highlight some of the most prominent lead co-chair objectives this year and how they have been addressed. And I will also go through some of the GEO achievements which we can be proud of as GEO community. I would also like to provide some ideas for the future of GEO, in particular regarding a vision for GEO 3.0, which we are about to embark on even today, and namely going beyond 2025. These messages are intended to incorporate a broader and more inclusive vision of the GEO community in perfect alignment with the equality, diversity, and inclusion that is up for adoption during this very plenary year. There are many things I could highlight, of course, but in the interest of time, I will also limit myself to three. First of all, first highlight. We have ensured continuity of the objectives set by the previous co-chairs in 2021, in particular on a very prominent one, and that is to strengthen the engagement with the UN bodies around GEO engagement priorities. We should be proud of the work done by GEO this year to establish strong ties with the UNFCCC in order to support the Paris Agreement with science-based input. This was reflected, in fact, in the recent COP26 meeting in Glasgow, UK. The role of the GEO Climate Change Working Group has been key in promoting GEO within the global climate community on mitigation and adaptation. Also, obtaining a clear recognition of GEO regarding the development of relevant knowledge, products, indicators, applications, and services, notably biosphere observations of ocean and land by the subsidiary body for scientific and technological advice of the UNFCCC. Can you please mute your mics, please? It's disturbing. Secondly, I would like to highlight some of the new LCC objectives that were introduced in 2021. LCC mean lead co-chairs. These new lead co-chair objectives were introduced to strengthen the work of GEO and our contribution to inform policy through data-driven scientific insights and evidence for policy development. They contribute to the promotion of open knowledge, integration of in situ data, democratizing access to digital geospatial technology and delivery of information and knowledge through services to reach the most vulnerable communities. Indeed, this is really very much a subject which is gaining much more momentum and very mainstream as we go along in the global climate challenges. For this reason, I am pleased to see that the statement on open knowledge is part of this year's plenary agenda. In this context, I value the work of the GEO Data Working Group in situ activities that is setting the basis for a strategy to facilitate access to and collection of ground-based data that is essential to deliver end-user services. There is also an encouraging move taking place around the GEOS infrastructure to develop and deliver an inclusive and integrated Earth observation, dissemination and exploitation system, integrating the efforts made within several communities such as the GEO Knowledge Hub. Although already ongoing for a while, I also want to praise the relentless work of the GEO Health community of practice that mobilized the GEO community to provide regular updates and assessments of the impact of the current pandemic on Earth systems and a society as a whole. Of course, we must continue to make progress on these efforts we have started, but it shows that GEO can step up and react when new challenges are on our doorstep. Finally, I would like to reflect on the ongoing process with the midterm evaluation. During this plenary, we will review the outcomes of the GEO midterm evaluation report. Indeed, I think it is the highlight of this plenary today. Its valuable conclusions need to be taken into account for both the immediate future of GEO, this means over the next 3 years of the current GEO implementation plan, but also for GEO beyond 2025. The midterm evaluation and the Executive Committee's response can be seen as an opportunity to take an inclusive approach in thinking about key topics and their evolution. This is an important part of setting the scene for GEO 2.0 and the third decade of GEO. There is somebody still on mute, so please mute yourself. The conclusions show that GEO is delivering continued progress towards becoming a world-leading community, coordinating availability, access, and use of open Earth observations data and information resources. GEO is contributing to unlocking the potential of Earth observations by connecting the demand for sound and timely environmental information to the supply of data and information about the state of our planet. There is a positive suggestion in midterm evaluation that we need to give more visibility to our actions in a more efficient manner, and this deserves suitable follow-up, enabling us to increase our efforts in this domain. This will help leverage existing investments and ensure products that are delivered to reach end users. As also highlighted, this requires an improved value proposition for GEO and an outreach strategy to target potential users, meaning government, citizens, industry, stating the GEO opportunities and deliverables. As a European member of GEO, I am convinced of the added value of GEO through many concrete activities across the GEO Work Programme. This is the reason why we proactively support many of those activities through different European Union programs such as Horizon Europe, the European Research and Innovation Framework Programme, and others. But what about the current GEO achievements? How can we build on the examples on already what the good achievements are? So supporting these engagements are the achievements of GEO, and this brings me to my second message I want to convey. Due to the breadth of the GEO activities, it is hard to do justice to all of them, no doubt, and the people working on these. But I would like to emphasize some GEO achievements during 21. One of them is a significant investment in supporting disaster risk reduction, complying with the call for the much needed action to cope with the increasing number of disasters that threaten the goods and lives of so many people globally. In the GEO Highlight Report 2021, you can find a review of several actions dealing with, for example, wildfire management, real-time tsunami forecasting, water management during hurricanes and evacuation and contingency plans. You can also see that GEO is providing tools for sustainable development through the GEO initiative, the so-called Earth Observation for SDGs. In this context, the GEO community provides tools in the domain of sustainable cities and human settlements, or for instance, in the monitoring of life on land. Among the many Earth observation data tools, methodologies, use cases, and capacity development sources, it is difficult for users to find and select the tools suitable for their needs and purposes. The SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals toolkits, will integrate all these resources and provide rich and coordinated guidance on using these resources. Furthermore, GEO is making progress on informed climate actions, which include forest monitoring, with an initiative worth mentioning, where the GEO community is helping Mozambique to use open Earth observation data and methods to respond to rapid deforestation. GEO is also involved in greenhouse gas accounting, where the GEO community was recently invited to help improve methods of greenhouse gas accounting through using Earth observation data. Furthermore, GEO is also contributing to protecting biodiversity and ecosystems. In this area, actions accelerated specifically in 2021 include support for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, ecosystem accounting, and the development of national adaptation plans. In addition, GEO's Biodiversity Observation Network, GEO-BON, has been working with the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, the so-called CBD, to develop indicators for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, which is the world's most ambitious commitment towards safeguarding biodiversity. I should, of course, here not forget to mention the regional GEOs, Amir Geo, AfriGeo, AOGeo, EuroGeo, as they have continued their efforts to bring GEO to the regions, as well as display regional achievements at the global level. We shall have an interesting plenary session on this tomorrow. With an expected endorsement by the plenary of GEO's new engagement priority on resilient cities and human settlements, I hope that this list will be complemented by actions in that area by this time next year. As I cannot list all of the GEO's achievements over the last year, please note that these achievements are also included in GEO highlight reports and in the statements of the GEO members and participating organizations. But what about the future? What are we looking for? Where shall we go? With my second message based on achievements of the past year, the third and final message relates to accomplishments still to come. Even though we have achieved a lot already, in the run-up to GEO post-2025, we need to take stock of the lessons learned from the current GEO approaches and take the conclusions of the midterm evaluation on board. GEO actions to be planned for the next 3 years and associated content will be important elements to frame the new GEO community activities and results. The midterm evaluation recommends focus on, and I quote, accelerated research to operations so that GEO can impact decisions and actions on the ground more quickly. This implies, in my view, including modalities to organize more operational GEO partnerships. These partnerships should have a user-oriented approach to accommodate and stimulate various parties. For example, using private sector capabilities to complement public sector skills and resources, as well as the financial sector to promote scalability and sustainability via access to finance, whilst maintaining the intergovernmental nature of GEO. Therefore, the road to GEO 3.0 requires additional fostering of engagement of GEO members via direct engagement in the GEO Work Programme, regional GEOs or through the continued action of the GEO Secretariat and communication of clear messages to different audiences. But without anticipating or preempting the content of GEO 3.0, I want to explore a few avenues with you that stem from our collective experience in GEO. I would say there is a need to further explore the way our national and regional EO systems are integrated into the global Earth observation systems, which is GEOS. Our community is very rich when it comes to Earth observation systems. However, the integration of their systems in GEOS is still very fragmented. If I take, for instance, the example of Copernicus, Europe's eyes on Earth, its uptake within GEOS has not reached its full potential yet. The GEO community could also expand efforts to support critical biodiversity restoration by building on GeoBond for biodiversity assessment and mapping to cope with the current dramatic collapse of species and support the current post-2020 biodiversity framework. Another domain that could be accentuated is action on the monitoring of global warming effects in critical areas. As a last point, I can see the added value of GEO to continue working collaboratively with developing countries, take into account the great know-how and knowledge already present, but also the urgent needs where Earth observation helps. GEO could have a more proactive approach to make the partnership more attractive for countries and therefore more inclusive by building on concrete needs and experiences in developing countries. So to conclude, I would like to suggest that in the run-up to GEO post-2025, we continue to promote the culture of equality, diversity, and inclusion by building on the GEO EDI statement that will actually be released later this week, as well as addressing the involvement of the younger generation. And I'm excited to see this year's GEO Week launching the first GEO track. I wish you all a very enjoyable and fruitful plenary. So with that, Tiana, I will now turn to you because the next item is about welcoming new members and participating organizations and associates. So over to you.
Great, thank you very much. And while Rick is pulling up one single little slide, if I can just have Mbaneni have a look at the Zoom chat, please. Sorry, guys, just have to do real-time triaging here. So, as is the tradition, I'd like to recognize the new participating in organizations who have joined the GEO family. And for this year, drum roll, they are participating organizations that have joined our Consortium of Universities for the Advancement of Hydrologic Science, QUASI, UNESCO International Center on Global Scale Geochemistry, International Research Center on Karst, Open Source Geospatial Foundation, Inter-Islamic Network on Space Sciences and Technology, the World Geospatial Industry Council, and our new associates are RACI Talks, Research Center for Toxic Compounds in the Environment, D4D Insights, and Planet. So thank you very much. Let's, wherever you are, even behind your muted microphones, give a quick applause. Do not unmute yourselves. And let's see, back over to you.
Thank you so much, Jana. I suggest we move swiftly now to the approval of the agenda. Of course, it's a virtual format, and because we are in virtual format, we could be more ambitious. And in fact, the agenda of the plenary this week is ambitious. There will be two sessions today. Session one is what we're doing right now, the overview of the week. Session two is the work program, the GEO Work Programme activities and contributions to global policy frameworks. Session three on Wednesday will be on engaging the GEO community. Session four on Thursday will inform us on how to bridge the digital divide with data, tools, and knowledge. And we'll close on Friday when we'll turn our heads to the future and to show us what is planned for the coming years. So may I request that the draft agenda be adopted? Are there any objections to that? Okay, there doesn't seem to be any objections. The summary report of the previous GEO Plenary 16 in Canberra, Australia was circulated by email. And I request the adoption now of GEO-16-1.5 draft report of GEO-16. May I ask for the adoption of that? Are there any objections or any remarks? If so, please put them in the chat. Okay, it seems that both the agenda and the adoption of the reports of the GEO-16 have been adopted. Thank you for that. We can now move swiftly on to the next item of the agenda, which is 1.6, the midterm evaluation report and management response. Now, of course, I've already introduced the midterm evaluation, which was an opportunity for us to take stock of the progress, the successes achieved by GEO since 2015, but also gives us the opportunity to improve with a renewal of GEO's mandate for 2025. So I thank you. I thank all the work that has been done, all the team that has been delivering on also the final report. But in the interest of time, I would now go straight to giving the floor to Mbonenmi in order to present the evaluation response of the advisory group for the work, for the response, for the executive. Sorry, I will reframe that. The executive committee response to the midterm evaluation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, and the chairperson for the opportunity. And I'm going to try and perform the miracle that I've been asked to do, which is to make sure that we don't miss out on getting into the next session. So I'm just going to go straight to the next slide. Here we're looking at the recommendations and our own responses to those, and why we decided to make these two presentations is because, of course, this one will also highlight the recommendations. So the recommendation relating to the GEO mission and value proposition indicated that there is a need to improve the definition, targeting, communication of, and emphasis on the value-added proposition and benefits derived from GEO so that the external organization can participate in GEO. So we are working with the Secretariat to develop and execute an iterative strategy for communicating tailored messages on GEO's value propositions. And we're hoping that this will actually help us try and address this challenge, but also making sure that these messages become consistent and we don't have the seasons where we are on and off. So the next slide. The issue about the GEO-WMO relationship, it says here that there should be no change on the GEO's legal status and its standing agreement with the WMO, and that we need to review the relationship with WMO to identify possible areas of cooperation in the light of recent improvements. And I think this is really the context of the relationships that those who have been in GEO many years back would know that the relationship was not always great, but it has improved significantly, and one could actually say that it really can be at a much better place. However, there is a need for us to continue to build on this, which we accept, and we'll really find all the necessary opportunities for us to build this, to strengthen this. So we'll consider additional opportunities and means to strengthen the systematic GEO-WMO collaboration, but also because most of us who are GEO members are also members or have membership in WMO, we want to also use these partnerships also to strengthen the relationship between WMO and GEO. Next slide. Communication and engagement. I think this is really another area in terms of the issue of improving internal and external communication, as well as synergies amongst the different elements of the work program, GEO governance bodies and secretariat, and to all of the GEO stakeholders. So here, the executive committee with the secretariat will review the GEO rules of procedure with the aim of simplifying and clearly communicating to the GEO governance process, especially with respect to GEO co-chairs, caucuses, and the commercial participation. The area of commercial participation, which has really come out as one of the areas where a lot of communication needs to be improved. So basically, as we look towards the next decade of GEO, we will be looking at some relevant structural reforms that can enhance this particular aspect. Next slide. The re-evaluation of GEOs. Here the recommendation is to establish the expert advisory group to explore to what extent the concept of GEOs is still relevant to the organization. And I'm pleased that in this regard, we have actually started the process in terms of discussing ways in which we can begin to put together the expert advisory group. You will get information about what is expected from us as members in terms of getting that process going. So that process, including the list of experts to be invited to participate, will be communicated. And we have already started to think about what this means in terms of building the GEOs in the next decade. So EXCO will oversee this process, and of course, we always are going to be depending on the support of the Secretariat and every single member of this organization. Next slide. The aspect of users' needs, the need for a more structured way to collect and consolidate user needs across the GEO Work Programme. And this is quite important because GEO is not going to be GEO unless we actually have a sense of what the user needs are. So in that regard, gap identified by the MTE is that each GWP activity interacts with users independently. The program board and the secretariat will develop a common framework for analyzing users and decision challenges. And this is really just to make sure that, again, we do not have artificial walls that separate the work that is being done within GEO. So that level of coordination will be quite crucial. So the program board will also review the criteria and process for the 2023-25 GEO Work Programme, communicate this to the GEO community and apply their criteria more strictly. So this is really just to make sure that there is a greater role that GEO will also have through the regional GEOs in collecting tailored requirements for the regions. Because again, we know that we've got many regions, the needs sometimes are not always the same, the gaps in terms of capacity are not the same, and the more we get at that level of engagement, the better we will be able to serve the needs of the various regions. Next slide. Internal processes and connections. Recommendation is to establish high-level focal themes that can drive synergies and improve coordination across GEO Work programs. And again, here the Secretariat has been tasked to develop a limited set of co-designed solution-driven activities to support the GEO engagement priorities. And based on existing GEO Work program activities and new contribution. So the Secretariat will propose a structured approach to mobilize actions among stakeholders for consideration by the program board and then by the executive committee. Again, this is where we begin to lay a foundation that we hope is going to be a strong one for the next decade of GEO. Next slide. There is a next slide, number 9, which I think we have skipped. Nine. Yes. So in terms of reflection on the recommendations and what we have set to do, we've realized that there is a need on that context to begin planning for post-2025 GEO. And this has really been inspired by the recommendations of the evaluation report and the discussion that we had yesterday at our 56th meeting of the executive committee, where we discussed the initial planning for reviewing GEO's mandate post-2025. So the process will be led by the executive committee, of course, with the support of the Secretariat, likely through dedicated working group. And here we really are making a call that let us get ourselves ready to identify those experts that are going to be part of this process so that we can provide, again, a good start on the basis of which we are going to build the work of GEO into 2025. And whatever we'll be able to work on starting from very early in the coming year, we will then begin to prepare the necessary documentations and directions, which will be done in 2 steps. One, at the 2023 Ministerial Summit, we will seek renewal of the GEO mandate based on the proposed post-2025 GEO strategic mission, framing key themes based on priority decision needs of members. And 2024-25, develop an impact-oriented, results-driven portfolio of projects, building on the current work, plus new commitments to address gaps. Now, what is important here is that while in the past there was the whole issue of renewal and continuity, we want to be able to build on the gains that have been made, while we also appreciate that part of us being relevant will also incorporate bringing on board some of the new ideas and thoughts to improve on what is already going on in motion. So there will be consultations with the GEO communities on key themes of the next mandate. And this will really begin already, as I've indicated, through the work that we hope that the expert advisory group will take us through beginning next year. And we are really going to be engaging everybody so that while we show that we're not necessarily are going to have all the 200 odd different ideas on board, but we think that these ideas will have sharpened each other enough for us to have enough consensus to say this is the direction that we want to take for GEO. I thank you, and I want to thank the Secretariat team for putting this presentation on our behalf. And again, thank my colleagues in the Executive Committee and the co-chairs for entrusting me with this role of presenting the response by the management to the midterm evaluation. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Boneni, for that very smooth and clear presentation of the recommendations and also the proposed responses of the Executive Committee. May I invite now interventions from the floor? And if you do need to take the floor, what I would say is, first of all, to indicate your request in the chat. And number two, to keep your interventions very short to the point in the interest of time, so that we could move on to the next item, since we are running a bit late. Thank you. So, yes, USA would like to speak. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. And I just will make this brief in that we want to thank the excellent contributions from the midterm evaluation team and the XCOM team that put together the response. The report is incredibly timely and in-depth and comprehensive, and encourage every one of the members and the participating organizations to read it, because it will provide the foundation for our reinvention and redefinition of GEO going forward. I want to thank the team, and we look forward to participating in the execution of the evaluation recommendations. Thank you.
Are there any other delegations wishing to take the floor after the United States? I take it that China wants to take the floor?
Okay, thank you. Midterm evaluation provides a more objective and a new perspective for GEO to review the work in the past 5 years. It also set a good foundation for the future direction of GEO. China endorses the midterm evaluation report and will support the response actions as one of the co-chairs and XCOM members as well. Thank you.
Thank you, China, for your remarks and for keeping it very brief as well. Any other delegations, please? Can you please either show your hand or put it in the chat, but I don't see any. If I don't have any requests in the next 10 seconds, we will move on and consider this report as adopted. The response of the Executive Committee. I don't see any hands. I don't see any requests in the chat. Okay. Oh, there is a hand there, but it's China. Yes, that was already done. Okay. I therefore declare that there is the adoption of the GEO-17-1.7b Executive Committee response. So thank you very much for your acceptance and for your collaboration. Thank you so much. We'll now pass on to the next item on the agenda, and this is the session 2.1, which is the GEO Work Programme and the links to global policy frameworks. Here we have a closer look to the work programme. We said that the work programme is closely linked to policy agendas, and that we have now reached a certain level of maturity as well, as those that are very high potential for us to work upon. Our priority engagement areas include United Nations 2030 Agenda for SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, We mentioned the Paris Agreements, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. These are all very mainstream. And we also have featuring prominently is the new urban agenda, which is a recognized fourth GEO engagement priority, and more generally, GEO Work Programme activities also address other major frameworks of international importance, such as, for instance, I mentioned in my remarks, the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Minamata Convention on Mercury, United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, and the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. So the success of our activities have been providing key services to these frameworks, depending on significant support also from members, like funding, dedicating teams, GEO Secretariat support, the existence of an active user community, as well as operational data and services. So growth and success in this area, as well as the potential to create impact, depends on continued investments, including by GEO members. So what do we expect from this session? This session we expect to provide the links to appropriate national government agencies to benefit from the achievements of these activities and also other GEO Work Programme activities. However, we have now a panel in order to discuss exactly this. And the panel brings around the table a number of distinguished scientists engaged in the GEO Work Programme. And they will share with us the progress made in their respective GEO initiatives, namely GeoGLOS, GOS4M, the GeoHazard Supersites and Natural Laboratory Initiative, and the GEO Wetlands Initiative. And to do that, we have Dr. Anthony Rea, who's the Director of Infrastructure at the World Meteorological Organization, who will moderate the panel. So, Anthony, I will pass now the floor to you. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the introduction. I hope you can hear me well. It's my great pleasure to be here to moderate this this session, which is about GEO supporting global frameworks. I think a goal which our two organisations share and hold very close to our hearts. We heard a little bit about the relationship between WMO and GEO during the last agenda item, and you know, maybe just a reflection. I think the relationship is very strong, particularly at the Secretariat level. You know, we occupy the same building, we see each other in the corridor, but we also have structured engagement, and that is really around how can WMO and GEO work together to solve societal and global problems, and I think that's an admirable thing. You know, my reflection on the COP26 a few weeks ago is that on Earth Information Day, WMO and GEO are there side by side, and I think the roles that we play can be extremely complementary, and I think that's what we're hearing about in this session today, is how GEO can support global frameworks and what are the linkages to those global frameworks. I know we're a little bit behind schedule, so perhaps we pull up the presentation. I think that's enough about me. So the theme of this session is to showcase activities in GEO Work Programme that are closely supporting and effectively closely supporting policy agendas and highlighting new opportunities. So if we can go to the next slide, there's some opening remarks from me. Just very quickly, I'm the Director of the Infrastructure Department at WMO, which is supporting the parts of the WMO Work Programme that are associated with the Global Observing System, right through to the delivery of data to support service delivery. So it is this kind of global framework for meteorology, climate, water, and the environment to some degree. So we've got 4 keynote presentations in the session this afternoon. Nicola Perrone, who's going to be talking about support to the Minamata Convention. Sarah Barsotti, who's talking about geohazards from an Icelandic perspective. We have Amir Giovanti talking about GeoGLOS. And finally, we have Lisa Maria Rebolo, who will be talking about wetland inventories. Now, given the time, I think we'd better just get on with the presentations, and then we'll have some time for a moderated Q&A at the end. And I assume I'm still trying to bring us in on schedule at 13:50. If we can push it by 10 minutes, that would be great, but you can let me know. So at this stage, I will hand the floor to Nicola. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Good afternoon to everyone, and thanks for scheduling this plenary speech on the Minamata Convention and what the GEO is doing for the Minamata Convention. So today it's a pleasure for me to highlight major achievement and what is the aim of this flagship that was initiated a few years ago. So next, please. So the overall, enhancing, the overall aim of this flagship is really to enhance the science policy interface. So there is an increasing, as we know, policy demand to answer key health and environmental issues related to mercury pollution. Mercury is a very strange beast in the global environment, so there are a lot of issues to deal with in all ecosystems. The Minamata Convention on Mercury, through its COPs, is preparing the criteria and guidelines for the monitoring and also for the effectiveness evaluation phases. Part of these criteria have been discussed in the first phase of the COP4 that was held just a couple of weeks ago, remotely, obviously. So the next phase is supposed to be in Bali next year, COVID allowing us to do that in person. So there is a need to foster the science policy process in order to gain knowledge from Earth observation data and developing also ad hoc Earth observation products to support the policymaker and the stakeholders. So this is a key. So how we can bring the science outcome in the policy arena in order to provide as end product something useful to all those that will take a decision without being a scientist. So next slide, please. So just to summarize the aim of this flagship, for those that are not familiar with it, the aim is really to support the objectives and goals of the UN Global Partnership on Mercury Fate and Transport Research. That is, this partnership is one of the 8 partnerships under UNEP umbrella that is supporting the need for scientific advice and guideline to the policy process. So is supporting UNEP in this big challenge. And also, more specifically, is to provide a global data set of comparable monitoring data by harmonizing existing regional and global scale network. This is a key aspect, because if you do not have available comparable, and I underline the strategic importance of this word, comparable monitoring data, it's very hard to take decision in the policy arena. So, and then, of course, when you have a lot of data, a lot of knowledge, how you put things together, you need really a tool that we call the Knowledge Hub, that you integrate observational data, various types of modeling tools that include atmospheric model, oceanic model, fate model in the ocean to assess the mercury bioaccumulation in marine biota, for example. And this would allow, as I will show you later, to co-design socioeconomic policy-driven scenario in order to understand what could be the most cost-effective strategy that the nation and all interested parties can implement in order to achieve the target of the convention. And then ultimately, also to help the parties, including UNEP, to assess the effectiveness of measures undertaken by the convention that parties may implement to reduce the risk for human health and the environment. Next slide, please. So during, despite the COVID, we kept working, and we were able to define the governance with all the governing bodies of the partnership, nominating a chair and a 3 co-chair, plus the focal point for each GEO region. And then we have a number of working groups and also participation to the GEO expert group in terms of data sharing and interoperability. So we have currently 21 partners that signed the partnership agreement. We have fixed the governing body already in our kickoff meeting last year, and also the representative of each focal point in the GEO region. So next slide, please. So the overarching goal, as I said, is really to provide harmonized and global comparable data. Currently, we have several networks on both regional and global scale, networks that use active monitoring technology, but also passive air sampling. So you see on this map on your right, both sites, both network, and now during the last couple of years, there is an effort from our partner to spread the passive air sampler, to integrate active sampling with the passive air sampler, especially in those regions that we have gaps in monitoring capability. So I refer to Africa, to several parts of Southeast Asia, Russia, Siberia. So there are several gaps in terms of monitoring. And as we know, we need to have a detailed information on the status of concentration of this contaminant in different media. Next slide, please. So the flagship developed a very well advanced data infrastructure with the data catalog, a GEO community portal. So you can have a fun to go on the flagship web portal and you can play with this. We have provided for each data set the metadata description. The work is in progress, and we have developed a system directly linked to the GEOS portal that is based on our GeoDAB that allows people to discover finding data and information and all kind of knowledge. There are a number of APIs that we are developing to help end user to use this infrastructure. Next slide, please. So just to give you a flavor, what is this knowledge hub? So next, we have different pop-up here. So can you go? So we have a number of policy questions coming from the policy meeting. And we use this policy question in order to provide scientific answer based on scientific evidence. So we can co-design a policy scenario. Next, please, using a large number of Earth observation data sets, both can be satellite based, not for Mercury, but we use a lot of satellite observation in our global scale model as a data simulation, and also from platforms that are in situ over the ocean, on buoys and ships and so on. Then, so at the end, we provide, next please, we provide policy scenario assessment. So I will show you in the next slide, please. So the type of a policy relevant question we get from the policy making world are like, what the trends of observation tell us in terms of relationship of emission with the terrestrial and the marine receptor, how this observed level have been changing over time. What is the relationship with the emission scenario? So there are a number of questions that you need to provide. For example, for Mercury, you can have, if you consider the ocean, for example, the ocean can be a sink or even a source, and it is an important source of mercury that is released to the atmosphere from the legacy, from the previous deposition of mercury from the atmosphere to the marine ecosystem, for example. Another question that we get very often, what is the relative contribution to the global emission from different anthropogenic sources? Or what is the importance of natural sources compared to anthropogenic sources? So questions like this that are very relevant when you talk about the policy and possible future strategy to limit the human exposure and impact and risk to this contaminant that is highly toxic. Next slide, please.
Nicola, just I'm going to have to ask you to try and wrap it up relatively.
Yeah, I can wrap it up anytime. But just to give you a storyline on mercury, that, as I said, is harmful, is of global, is a global contaminant that is regulated by, as we said, the Minamata Convention. And one of the goals is really to help analyze different emission reduction scenario. So next, please. So this is just a workflow that you can have a better insight going on our portal that goes from Earth observation data, developing Earth observation product, feeding a number of downstream tools and services in terms of a biochemical model, trophic transfer model. So the ultimate goal is to assess how much mercury is in the marine biota, for example, if we reduce emission in the atmosphere. Next slide. So if you go on our web portal, you can play with this. You can choose the emission inventory. You can choose the type of model you like to use for the atmospheric component and the marine component. You can reduce emission in one region and see what is the expected outcome that you may expect in terms of reduction in the position fluxes. Next slide, please. So this gives you type of information that our knowledge hub provides. So what would be the trend in a reduction in deposition over marine and terrestrial ecosystem, and also the trend over time for each emission reduction scenario. But you can play with this on our portal, and you can become confident with it. So we are willing to provide all kinds of support. But next slide. So further development, we are developing this knowledge hub, and our final goal is to include the use of all atmospheric models that are currently used by the scientific community, all marine model, and also we would like to include also a cost estimate for each emission reduction strategy. So this is a work in progress, but considering the activity that we have ongoing in this flagship, if you go to the next slide, I ask you to pay attention to the side event that we have organized, that Dr. Stefan from Canada have organized the side event on our flagship that will be on this screen on the 25th of November at 5 p.m. So I invite everyone to listen what will be all the presentation that will provide you an insight on the current monitoring effort of the flagship. So for any question, please contact me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. And my apologies at the start of your presentation. I neglected in my duties to formally introduce you as the Research Director of the National Research Council of Italy and the Chair of the Global Observing System for Mercury. So thanks very much for your presentation, and we look forward to some questions and answers. Next, if we can go to the next slide. Our next speaker is Sarah Barcott, the coordinator of volcanic hazards at the Icelandic Meteorological Office. And over to you, Sarah, please.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Many thanks for the introduction, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to really present to you today, I guess, some fruitful or very successful experiences in Iceland for what concern the usage of Earth observation data for volcanic crisis management. So I'm going to talk about geohazard supersites and the natural laboratory as a contribution to how in Iceland we have been responding to volcanic crisis. Next slide, please. So just to give an overview about where we are and what we have to deal with. So in Iceland, indeed, we have more than 30 active volcanic systems, and the IMO, which is the Icelandic Meteorological Office, is the volcano observatory in charge of monitoring and taking care of volcanoes in the country. We need to go back to 2010, when I guess everybody is very familiar with the eruption in the Eyjafjallajökull, that at that time managed to ground about 80% of the all European aviation traffic, at least for 6 days. And it is just the latest eruption in 2021 in Fagdalsfjall, just in the Reykjanes Peninsula in the southwest part of the country, which has been affecting an area where indeed up to the 70% of the entire population of the country lives. And we had over 6 months, that has been the duration of the eruption, up to 340,000 tourists that have been visiting the country. So I think these are 2 good examples. Again, there are many more in the world, showing how much volcanic eruptions often imply a large economic, social, cultural, and political impact, not only on local scale, but also on international level. Next slide, please. So just to explain a little bit in a nutshell how we work here then, the civil protection authorities is of course responsible to take decision regarding in general natural hazards and natural risks. The scientists in Iceland, they work very closely with the civil protection through what we call the Scientific Advisory Board. And this has been in place since a few decades. So as you can imagine, in crisis situations, such a board is called, it is activated upon request by the civil protection. The aim of such a table of this board is really to bring together experts that are indeed just providing, of course, their expertise, but also the most relevant data that are available in order to evaluate the situation, the potential hazards, the possible scenarios, and the possible implication. So that, again, the civil protection can take actions in this sense. Next slide, please. So luckily, it is since 2013 that Iceland has been declared a permanent geohazard supersite. And this has been really functional indeed for us to gather and collect a lot of satellite images. Here I'm referring to TerraSAR and Cosmos SkyMed satellite images, of course, targeting over the most active regions. Again, volcanoes are spread all over the country, but of course there are areas where volcanoes are much more dense. Such data, they have been really instrumental in evaluating both volcanic eruptions that happened in 2014 and 15, and the most recent one this year, but also to identify and follow up volcano unrest. So phases during which volcanoes are showing something unusual that we need to be aware. We need to start to think about possible evolution, but eventually an eruption do not happen, like in Erevaikuti and in Askja volcano just this year. Next slide, please. So then exactly, I really want to just show you a couple of examples about the usage of such data has been making a difference. So how the usage has been really helping the scientists to communicate to the civil protection about impending hazards or situation that might be evolving towards potential risk. This is an example for the Fagradalsfjall unrest that eventually became an eruption in March this year, where the satellite radar data has been really key in identifying the location where the magma was trying to get to the surface, not only where, but even how much possibly. And as you see, this has been really translating into action. So this is on the right, this is the map that was eventually produced in collaboration with the civil protection, where we were identifying an area that was eventually the exclusion zone. Because in light of this data, we were really asking the civil protection or informing the civil protection that potential additional eruptive fissures could have been happening in that area. The next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, thank you. So, and this is the other case still happening this year. As you see, still on the left is the data, the type of map that the scientists have been producing by using satellite data, where it was possible to evaluate an ongoing uplift. So the land was rising near the volcano Askja. And this data, of course, they were critical because they were indeed allowing us to cover an area where there were not enough other stations, what we call the GNSS data that usually are used for detecting deformation. And in light of this information that was possible to gather through satellite, the Sentinel data, then the civil protection elevated their alert level to the uncertainty phase. As you see here on the right, this is where the civil protection have been declaring the status of uncertainty for ASCIA, and the aviation color code has been also raised to a higher level. It is the current yellow color code. So next slide. I think then this has been a chance to show you a couple of successful stories, again, from Iceland, of the Earth observation data used for risk reduction. Of course, Iceland, I think it is one of the very good case to talk about. We are a small country, roles are very well defined, procedures are in place, everybody are working well each other. However, there are, and I think it is an important point to keep home, other super sites that are in less developed countries and are still suffering from limited local scientific and observational capacities. I guess the last eruption in Niragongo 2021 is definitely a good example. Fatalities occurred there. And we should keep in mind that international supports might be needed in specific area in the world. Iceland is part of a GEO super site, of course, has been accessing open high quality data. In this sense, scientists have been capable to offer a much more improved advice to those taking decisions, implying necessarily more social benefits. Of course, it is never enough. So we might even keep in mind that there might be the chance even to open and make more data available. And this is just a couple of examples that could be added, or how to say, useful for Iceland, mainly when it goes into time of acquisition, frequency of acquisition. So in order to really cover those events happening over a shorter time window, where we might need a higher temporal resolution information to provide an assessment about the ongoing event. Next slide, please. I guess it's my thank you to you all.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks for that really interesting perspective. For me, coming from the WMO side of things, we're very accustomed to using satellite data to detect eruptions once they've already occurred. But I think this is a great example of another use of satellite information in a preventative way, or in a preparedness kind of a way. So we can go to the next slide. I'm very conscious of the time. Our next slide is Amir Giovanti, Chief Science Officer, Environment Manager, Tel Aviv University, and he'll be talking to us about geoflows. Please go ahead, Amir.
Okay, thank you very much. Very happy to be here. So again, I'm Amir, and I'm teaching in Tel Aviv University, and I'm a former head of the Surface and Hydrometeorological Department at the Israeli Water Authority. Spent there quite a lot of time, and I was involved in many joint research and conferences with the neighbor countries around Israel. And today I want to show and highlight and show some example from the Middle East, from the region, so we can go to the next slide, and how the GeoGlobe's hydrological data can help us and help the region to better plan in a changing climate. So we are coming from a relatively dry area. We can see here the map of Israel with the Palestinian Authority and the Gaza Strip, the neighbor countries. You can see on the black the basin, and the basin are transboundary. Some of them starts in the Judea, Samaria, and the Palestinian Authority, go through Israel, and then drainage into the Mediterranean, into Gaza. So we are sharing the same water resources. As I said, it's a relatively arid area. And if we are talking about projection for the future, we know that because of climate change, in about a few decades, almost half of the population in the world will suffer from some kind of water shortcut. So in the Middle East, in the Mediterranean area, it's the current situation. We already suffer from drought and suffering from climate change effect. So we are talking about transboundary basins that are experience the same climate effect. And we call it the two sides of the same coin. We can have dry period, and then we can have very wet period with flash flood coming from the desert or coming from the Mediterranean. We just experienced it this current autumn. We had really dry period until last week with forest fire, and then on this weekend, flash flood with damages. So this is the story of the Mediterranean, and again, transboundary basin need to share data in order to better plan and operate. So we can go to the next slide. And here is the place that GeoGloss can help. And I started to work with the GeoGloss data last year. And since I left the Water Authority, I'm working with the Israeli Fire and Rescue Authority, which is a governmental agency under the Ministry of Homeland Security. And they deal either with fire, dry period, but also with rescue people from flood. And actually, there is a lack of data in this region. Of course, everyone has his own Met service, but regarding transboundary rivers, we don't have data and we don't have shared data. So then I found GeoGloss last year. Last year was really rainy and really wet period. We had very severe flood. You can see on the right side a picture of the border, the fence here between Israel and Gaza. Everything was flooded, chaos. On the left side, we can see the geographic map. So on blue is the river, and it starts from the Palestinian Authority at the hills, at the Judea, Samaria hills, then go through Israel, then entered into Gaza, and at the end, come again to Israel, and then drainage into the Mediterranean, which means that all the parties need to share the data, need to be able to view data, and the ECWF GeoGloss initiative is an amazing platform. When I discovered it last year, you see here an example from November 2020, I was able to announce to the locals, so we can go to the next slide and I will be able to show it. Yeah. So based on the GeoGloss data, I was able to alert and announce to the local Israeli authorities. It's called Eshkol Local Authority near the border with Gaza, and also to the deputy of the Palestinian Water Authority in Gaza, told them that according to the GeoGloss, we have high probability, because there is an ensemble of data, that a severe flash flood will come, please take an action. The forecast is providing, the forecast like that is provided by international agencies, like the ECWF GeoGloss, is trustable by all parties, because, you know, in this region, not all the countries surrounding are cooperate with each other. And here there is a chance to share data among everyone. And this is why we call it data without border, because it's actually the case and actually the reality. It can build cooperation in the region, even behind climate and hydrology. So the urgent need is for data for, you know, taking action, dealing with climate change. But if we have shared database and everyone will be able to access it freely, not managed by one country or by one agency in the region, but something that is coming from the international community, I think that from my experience, long years experience, it can be great. And it can really build a bridge for you know, negotiation, cooperation, and even peace. But there is a need for capacity building, training, and more high-resolution data in this region. Those are relatively small basin, so without getting into too much hydrology and climate technical data, there are others international data providers that you know, provide hydrological data, but the amazing story of GeoGloss that deliver the data freely and everyone can access and download the data in a very high resolution, I think is adding the value. Still, we need to downscale it to the region size and make sure that everyone is using the data is correctly. As I see it as a scientist and also as a governmental employee, former one, the spirit of GeoGloss project is excellent platform for achieving cooperation and transboundary relationship. So it's not only science, it's much behind it. We can go to the next slide. And it's fit perfectly with the UN Sustainable Development Goals that almost all the countries in the world approved and signed. So it's fit for the spirit of no poverty, zero hunger, cooperation, peace, equality. You can see all the items in the slide. Water is an issue, is a major issue. It's going to accelerate in the coming years. It's already happening due to climate change, and definitely in a region like the Mediterranean basin, or specifically in the Middle East. And I think the Middle East is a beautiful laboratory for the need and the urgent taking action due to climate change, and a place for cooperation. So we can start from our small neighborhood, Israel, Palestine, and the region, Gaza, which are data scare area, but we can take it behind to other places and to the neighbor countries also, because the data are really, really essential here. So I think the GeoGlobe spirit is definitely fitting to the UN goals. We can go to the next slide and sum it up. So we can go please to the next slide, yes. So point that I would be happy if you take home from here is that the GeoGlobe ECMWF project and the contribution it's provide, it's, as I said, it's exactly what the UN Sustainable Development Goal is targeting for, and it's tied to the critical need for water security. As I said in the beginning of my talk, it's already affecting area like the Middle East, but it will be much more critical in the coming days or decades. So everything we will build now, infrastructure and database, will serve the next generation. If we're talking about equality, so for countries with transboundary watershed, like the case I just showed, Palestine, Israel, and the Gaza Strip, international service like the GeoGlobes provide a natural environment for multi-sectoral collaboration, and organization from both countries can access the data, can see the same hydrological forecast, and everyone will take action as he think and believe, but the data will be shared. I think it's amazing progress. We never had such opportunity to do it. I use it since last year all the time. And because of that, so behalf of the worldwide stakeholder community that I represent them from the region, from the Middle East, we request from the international community further investment in order to develop additional capabilities, training of the system, and maybe most importantly, keep it open and available to all. Because if it will be just by authorities or governmental organization, it will stay there. The spirit of GeoGlobes, the open data, is that much what makes this tool so powerful. Still, we will need to adjust it to a region. We need to do what the scientist is calling calibration. We know how to do it. We would like to do it. We just need your help in order to bring it to the region and not keep it just for the scientists. So we can end it. Go to the next slide. So I would like to thank you for the time. And I wish we will be able to push and promote this cooperation for peace due to water and weather data. Thank you all.
Thanks very much, Amir. And I think there's a strong resonance there with also the work of WMO in terms of trying to, one of our focus areas is to increase the availability and the sharing of hydrological data. So I think, once again, there's a strong resonance between the activities of GEO and various international frameworks. And I completely agree also that the Sustainable Development Goals can be a rallying point for us, around which we can focus our cooperation. The next presenter is Dr. Lisa Maria Rebello, Principal Scientist of the International Water Management Institute. Please, Lisa Maria, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Anthony, and good morning, everybody. So I'm speaking today in my capacity as Vice Chair to the Scientific and Technical Review Panel to the Ramsar Convention of Wetlands of International Importance to express the needs and to highlight the potential for greater impact rather than focusing on what's been done in the past. So the purpose of the convention is to promote wetland conservation and wise use, and the convention has 172 parties who, amongst other obligations, agreed to manage all of their wetlands based on the concept of wise use and to produce wetland inventories. So the definition of wetlands within the convention is very broad, and it includes, to name a few, mangroves, peatlands, marshes, rivers and lakes, deltas, floodplains, flooded forests, as well as man-made types such as rice paddies. So healthy and functioning wetlands are critical to both human livelihoods and to sustainable development. And yet the flagship publication of Ramsar's STRP, the Global Wetland Outlook, shows that up to 87% of global wetland resources have been lost. And between 1970 and 2015, inland and marine and coastal wetlands both declined by approximately 35%. That's 3 times faster than the rate of global forest loss. Wetland-dependent species are also in serious decline, with 81% of inland and 36% of coastal and marine species affected. There are obviously multiple pressures on wetlands, and an update to this Global Wetland Outlook will be released by the panel in 2022, which shows that the situation continues to decline, highlighting that the urgency with which wetlands need to be monitored cannot and should not be underestimated. Next slide, please. So this is reflected in the global policy agenda. Wetlands are immediately important to several SDGs and indirectly to many more. National wetland inventories are used to track SDG indicator 6.6.1, the extent of water-related ecosystems, and EO data are also used as input. In terms of relevance for global goals on biodiversity and nature, 40% of all species live or breed in wetlands. And the negative trends in biodiversity and ecosystem functions are projected to continue or worsen. And targets of no net loss cannot be achieved without a better understanding and monitoring of wetlands, and in particular restoring those that have already been degraded and lost. And for climate agreements, many types of wetlands, but in particular peatlands and blue carbon ecosystems, are exceptionally important in mitigation, and we're only just beginning to understand how important that is. While freshwater wetlands are crucial for the water cycle, maintaining water security, buffering extremes. Wetlands thus have the potential to contribute to both mitigation and adaptation targets. So the Glasgow Climate Pact details the critical importance of nature-based solutions for climate change with far-reaching benefits for people and nature. Wetlands are nature-based solutions which can contribute to nationally determined contributions and to national action plans. And the Pact entails preparation of new NDCs before the next climate change COP in 2022. All countries have wetlands, but many have not been included in NDCs so far. But by including wetlands in these updated NDCs, countries can take a significant step forwards towards raising the ambition while supporting adaptation, resilience, and meeting other targets. But this requires attention over the next 12 months. Next slide, please. In order to do this and achieve this, the science and technology are obviously critical. Wetlands are typically inaccessible. They cover large areas. Many wetlands are seasonally and spatially dynamic and have a presence of water. So they're well suited to the use of Earth observation. We have a solid foundation to build on, many existing examples, pilot demonstrations, global products for individual wetland types, and toolkits. And of course, GEO Wetlands, which provides a platform and a knowledge base. But there is still much to do, and our GEO community potentially has a huge role to play in this. In particular, there is a big need for operational large-scale approaches with global outputs, integration across thematic areas, but also across initiatives. So there are various GEO initiatives with commonalities, not least the one we just heard from, and a focus on co-creation, end-user-oriented tools and services which address the critical needs and gaps. Next slide, please. So the Ramsar Convention provides a platform like no other to foster collaboration and partnership in support of other international policy mechanisms by supporting the use of the best available data, advice and policy recommendations to enable national governments to realize the benefits of fully functional wetlands to nature and society. In terms of alignment, the convention is working towards the next COP, which will be held in November next year, where high priority work areas of the Scientific and Technical Review Panel, the STRP, for the next triennium, the next 3 years, will be agreed in a resolution. As part of this process, the panel are currently developing recommendations for work areas and priorities, which will be submitted in March next year to the Standing Committee, which then prepares matters for decisions by the COP. So again, the time is ticking to identify potential high high priority areas where Earth observation can contribute to. And so just for a few concluding remarks, support is needed from the GEO community. Monitoring of wetlands is crucial, but it's not yet good enough. Even basic information baselines are often weak. National wetland inventories are important in planning and decision support at the national level, but they still need to be strengthened. Wetland inventories are also critical for each of the global policy processes which I mentioned. But inventories and reporting also need to go beyond just extent to include state, and approaches for this require development. By integrating wetlands into NDCs, we offer a way for countries to achieve more ambitious climate plans. But it will not be possible to achieve global biodiversity, climate change, and net zero targets or sustainable development goals without safeguarding and restoring the health of global wetlands. And for that, better inventories, monitoring, and assessment is critical. And only by working outside of the silos and across sectors can we achieve the targets of these ambitious frameworks. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, Maria, for your presentation, which I think looks a little more at that kind of framework level of what's required. So I'm sorry to inform everyone that the session started a little bit late, and now we've run out of time for questions and answers. I will note that all of the presenters' email addresses are in the slide deck, which is available, as is my address. But perhaps some quick observations from me, just to kind of wrap it up. I think from all of the examples, what we've seen is the importance of data getting into the hands of decision makers in an accessible and interoperable way, and then the importance of also tracing back all aspects of the value chain, for example, the connectivity of the observation sites or the availability of the satellite observations, right through to the provision of the observations themselves. So I think it's really important to remember that when we are addressing these kind of big policy issues, that we need to look right back through the value chain, and that's and I think that's one of the strengths of the GEO framework, where our GEO can really play a role. So I'm very sorry to wrap this up early. I would like to thank the four keynote speakers for their excellent and insightful presentations, and with that I will hand back to the session coordinators. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Thank you everyone for this great session, and we'll be back. We will have a 5-minute break now, and we will be back at 2 p.m. Actually on Air Meet for who can, and it will be also on Zoom, I think, for other communities. Thank you.